Chongqing in the west of China is the new 21st century megacity, the fastest growing metropolis in the world. Its population is estimated to be more than 30 million. This conurbation attracts up to 1,000 people a day looking for work and a place to live. Urbanization is advancing like a tidal wave, but urban planning lags behind, trying to find space for housing and get traffic under control. Relentless inward migration forces developers to reach for the skies, while growing traffic chokes the city streets. The place seems to be collapsing under its own weight, but what other options are there? Chongqing is growing too fast. So, unlike other cities, it has no master plan for its growing population and their movements. The administration allows homes to be built wherever there is space. Developers build as high and as cheaply as possible. Like nearly all other cities in the world, the megacity on the Yangtze is growing around a city centre with a high density of banks, administrative buildings and company headquarters. And the glamour of the city obscures the shortcomings of the developments around it. But are there any alternatives? And if so, can they compete with the magnetic attraction of this city skyline? Are there any new and different urban planning models? The surroundings of Ordos, an area in the far north of China on the Mongolian border. An expanse of desert and steppe that was sparsely populated for centuries. When coal was discovered here in 2000, the influx of migrants started. Ordos joined the ranks of China's many new megacities. Innumerable residential towers were built in anticipation of even more people. But Ordos is also known for its ghost town, a satellite town created for people who have still not come. There are a number of places like this in China. Amid the scattered wastelands of empty tower blocks, the plan is to create what should actually have been here first, a city centre, where the eye-catching Museum of Art stands against the backdrop of faceless skyscrapers. This is where the pulsating public heart of Ordos New Town will one day beat. The museum was designed by architect Chu Tianchan.
This will be the new area with the culture program coming in and also developments, right? Maybe housing developments. So along the sand dune, there will be a cluster of public buildings. But at this moment, I don't know if it's going to happen.
The building seems to crouch, nestling in a depression, as if waiting for support from other buildings to give the city growing around it a lesson in order.
The building itself, it's art space, so it has its own functional requirements. But somehow it's also open to the surroundings as its gesture. And we also took the inspiration of this sand dune, the flow of the sand dune, to make the building kind of a continuous flow, kind of unwinded itself on along this geometry or along this topography of our site. So it's really like taking a route around it, also somehow like a dance or like the ink painting brush along this side.
A museum as a blueprint and substitute for the missing heart of a city. Routes and circles around a centre are at the heart of its design. The museum could be the core of a downtown that has yet to grow around it, with roads and open spaces mirroring the internal structure of the building.
It's a modern architecture. So yes, steel and glass to open up the space, to introduce the view into the space. But also we also wanted to give a sense of local, the local blue slate, and also the wood to give you a sense of warm feeling. So it was a play of different material in this building too.
The architect's modesty conceals the true intention of her design. She has built a museum, a place for exhibiting art. But in the context of this city, which evidently still has no substantive plan for its metropolitan development, the building's real mission is to show the city fathers how to create a centre with the roots and open spaces that people need. Creating individual buildings as miniature works of urban planning, that is, models for cities of the future, is a huge challenge for architects. Their creations need to bring order to an urban landscape and, like a magnet, create a unifying field around elements that are currently unconnected. That is precisely what architect Ma Yan-song was asked to do in a commission for another spectacular museum building in Ordos.
Ordos belongs to Mongolia culture, like Norman culture. We can say local culture. But the local term comes from mainstream culture. And the local people, let's say the local government, they don't want to become local culture, right? They also want to merge into the modern culture. So I think they were in the crisis, in the process of modernization, how they express themselves.
A landmark for the future, the museum is designed to be recognized from a distance. Visitors will know they are arriving in Ordos, a pioneering design intended to create order amid urban sprawl.
I was thinking maybe we should just put something so abstract, has no reference to the time and any other culture, just put there. Maybe something new will come to this object. So we did this a bubble or spaceship like form, look very futuristic, so it doesn't belong to Earth or anywhere on this Earth.
Inside the gracefully curved spaceship for the 21st century, the visitor is initially overwhelmed by the sheer size of the space, by the height, by the light, and by the sweeping staircases. This building feels like the city hall of a city that believes in its future.
So Ordos Museum is just abstract objects with a cut here. It's cut, so we want to make the building show the artificial treatment, but more important, the building is landed on the waving landscape, and here you can have a lot of people sit, walk like this, and here the entrance of the building, and you can go up from here.
From outside, the building appears to have a smooth finish, but inside, folds and depressions are visible. They contort and compress the space, allowing light to enter at many different angles, sometimes in a wide beam, sometimes reflected by a facing wall.
And we have two sunlight like this, one here, one on the other side, and inside is lobby. And the main building is solid because the cold weather over there. So during the day, you don't need any artificial lighting in this museum, in the public space.
It's a breathtaking space, and it has a surrealistic air about it. But from a distance, it could be taken for a very high tent. Its stability ensured by the many straps and struts inside, the indentations on the top reminiscent of the depressions carved into the desert by the wind. The Ordos Museum is like a model, a role model for a planned community that first wants to develop into a pulsating metropolis. The museum could also be the headquarters of that new community, showing the planners how to design a proper city.
I see this building as a generator. Maybe something new will happen in the future, because currently you can say this building is good, it's belong to local or not belong to this local, but no answer, you don't know yet.
What is still a dream in Ordos has been a reality in Ningbo for a number of years. A new economic hub has emerged with a population of nearly 6 million. It's situated in the northeast of China in the Yangtze River Delta, a region with a high population density. Ningbo has a very old history and lots of new skyscrapers. It has old heavy industry, but also many new high-tech companies, for which high-density central business districts are being built. The architecture firm Mada Spam has realised lots of similar projects. The architect responsible for the design of these new districts is Jane Zhang.
I think something is very distinct in our history. We have a great, break in our history of architecture. That break is a break for everything. It's the Cultural Revolution. It destroys everything.
The new districts of the new cities take shape without planning guidelines. The architects who design them need take no account of surroundings. They can decide on height and density in consultation with the investor, and they have carte blanche as far as design is concerned. The only stipulation is, it needs to be modern and marketable. The architects work in a vacuum, in a sterile urban space with no context.
In China, everything's happening so fast, so there is no planning or architecture design in a proper approach. I would say it's in chaos. So for architects and even planners, we cannot control it. Even our government, a very strong one, cannot control it. So for us, it's like a reaction to do what is happening. So it's always behind the schedule.
Mada Spam decided that the projects it realises need to be miniature new towns. Thought should be given to everything for which the municipality takes no responsibility.
But on the other hand, this is a good thing for architects to have more influence into the society by doing something actually a lot more front end than a traditional architect. So this is something in between master planning and architecture.
The view from above reveals what the new towns lack: a master plan. They are a collection of seemingly separate, high-density districts placed at random on a huge site with no real connections between them. So architects like Jane Zhang feel responsible for something that really ought to be done by society or politicians.
Architects today, it's not as the traditional architects receive very clear design brief and work on a single house or a single building. We work on a city, but that's so-called, I would call it easily, is a big architect. I think this should not be called architecture design. It should be called a spatial planning process to contain this program and to rebuild a new form of a city within a new settlement area. So this is very exciting and great challenges.
Ningbo is also the site of a housing development that made headlines around the world. It's a village in a city with a small town feel. Stacks of single-family dwellings, around 200 of them, designed to give the district what has been lost: identity and neighbourhood. It was designed by China's anti-modernist rebel and best-known architect, Wang Shu.
A problem that is often associated with high-rise buildings is that people don't know where they live. They know only that they live somewhere in an abstract tower block. I wanted to design a new kind of tower where people can clearly define where they live. I created traditional courtyard homes in a vertical arrangement, and the result was a residential tower. The idea was quite simple. Even someone living at the top of the tower, 100 meters above the ground, would feel as if he lived in a two-story house.
Surrounded by modern skyscrapers, the Courtyard House is seen by many architects as the ultimate embodiment of Chinese history and tradition. The Courtyard House is a 1 to 2-story building, a dwelling for 3 generations, each with its own home within the home. Modern Chinese architects seem to yearn for this principle of order, but the idea of creating a stack of such dwellings is very bold.
If you're standing in front of the building, you can say to a friend, "Look, that's my home up there, where you can see the osmanthus tree." You can show people exactly where you live.
The vertical courtyard house represents a new dialogue between European new town concepts of 100 years ago and Chinese small town tradition. Here in Ningbo, assembled to create a vertical garden city in one of the fastest growing new metropolises of the 21st century.
The intention is to get away from the soulless modern tower and allow a kind of neighborhood to develop. People see their neighbors again. They see when a new tree is planted in the neighbor's garden. And on the other side of the apartment, the neighbors have visitors and are drinking tea together in the garden. We have a new situation here, one that didn't exist in tower blocks in the past. You see that I built curving, skewed buildings, so people see a lot more of those living around them. That is a core element of my design.
Wang Shu's ideas provide food for thought. They fulfill their purpose as architecture, but they are also a challenge and prompt to think about things differently for the future, to have the courage to create new and original ideas for the crowded city. In Shanghai, the Huangpu River separates the colonial riverside and promenade from the new financial and commercial centre. Shanghai is China's most international city, a metropolis with an estimated population of 17 million. In the last 15 years, the new business hub has grown skywards with ever more and ever taller skyscrapers. Now, disused industrial sites on the old waterfront are starting to be redeveloped. A futuristic low building right on the riverbank marks the centre of this site north of the promenade. It was from here that the old port installations extended northwards towards the China Sea. From the other side of the river, the size of the new district, with offices grouped around an inner core, becomes apparent. A city within the city is under construction, a project comparable to the reurbanisation of the London docks. An attempt is made to ensure balance in the volume and height of the buildings, and preference is given to uncompromising modern architecture. As in the successful development of La Défense, the business district created over 25 years ago in Paris. In the north of the area, China's first yacht and cruise port is taking shape, sending out a signal that the country is catching up with Western metropolises. The new district, called the North Bund, is clearly recognisable at night. All this is based on a master plan, which is a new development in Chinese urban planning. Pudong, across the river, is a different matter. The giant skyscrapers of Asia's new Manhattan are all individuals, competing for attention and prestige, each one seeking to look down on the others. Together they look like a range of concrete peaks, parts of the dramatic stage set for the grand neon opera that is Shanghai, the city that could in future be China's biggest metropolis. With an eye on that future, plans were made years ago for a ring of satellite towns around the city. Not peripheral developments, but physically separate entities, created to ease the pressure on Shanghai. The master plan for one of those new cities, with a population of up to 1.3 million, was drawn up by German architect Meinhard von Gerkan.
There were no points of reference, not in an architectural, historical, environmental, geographical or any other sense. No mountains, no trees, nothing. Just a few watercourses, lots of watercourses. And that was the site for the city of Lingang.
It was the first attempt to design an entire new city since Brasilia and Canberra in Australia. A mammoth drawing board project, a city strategically planned and based on the expectation that millions of people will move here between Shanghai and the sea in the next few decades.
The main reason for designing and building the city in the first place is the port nearby. A port built far out to sea, 32 kilometers offshore in open water. It's connected to the mainland by a bridge. But it also needs a new city.
It is perhaps an architect's greatest challenge, perhaps also his dream, a master plan that needs to take account of no existing physical features. But creating a cohesive urban entity requires a concept and order.
There's nothing arbitrary about it. It's a kind of order. And we created that order in the form of a circle with a single center.
At that central point, visible from afar, is the tallest structure. Like a church in the old cities of Europe, the Maritime Museum is both a centerpiece and a promise for the future, a prosperous future assured by the port.
Landbebau.
3 kilometers, then development and promenade. We had to turn everything inside out. And then comes the 600-meter deep parkland zone. There are no private developments here, only public buildings. After that, we have the residential districts, all geometrically aligned with the center, all the same size, 840 by 840 meters. And between them is nature, not parks but natural landscapes, woodland with lots and lots of trees.
There's nothing like it anywhere else in China, an attempt to combine European urban planning with the Chinese city of the future. This planned city borrows so much from the New Town concept developed in Europe in the early 20th century that it might one day seem like a foreign island in the sea of Chinese cities. It is one of the many experiments looking for 21st century urban culture.
This configuration creates something that is all too natural. Where you have high density, you find a tendency to spread to the periphery because there's potentially far more space there. So the density diminishes. And at the same time, the center, which is normally inaccessible and congested, becomes free for activities. Ultimately, though, good urban space depends on just one thing: balance between diversity and unity.
The future will show whether this urban model succeeds. Lingang is still a medium-sized town with a population of less than 100,000. It will take a long time, many years. First, the people need to come and turn the town into a city. Maybe then it will one day be said that China tried to see if it was worth learning from Europe. Here in Lingang, 60 kilometers from Shanghai.